Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Capital Region Podcast. This podcast provides updates and insight into what is happening in the development world throughout Florida Panhandle. We host guests from both the private and public sector. Our parent organization is the Urban Land Institute. It's also known as ULI. It was established in 1936. The Urban Land Institute is a nonprofit education and research institute with more than 48,000 members. Our North Florida region includes about 600 professionals, and it covers 30 counties ranging from Flagler to the east all the way to Escambia on the west, including communities of Gainesville, Jacksonville, St. Augustine, Tallahassee, Panama City, and Pensacola. Locally, we are the ULI Capital Region, and we have about 70 members carrying from Tallahassee to Pensacola. Our members include people in every profession and sector of real estate development and land use who their goals are to network, to share knowledge, further their careers, and also give back to the profession and communities they live in. These members include developers, planners, attorneys, municipal representatives, designers, universities, builders, and many more. So as you can see, it's a very wide variety of professions we have involved in this group. Today, we're coming to you from Tallahassee, Florida. My name is Charlie Johnson. I'm a professional landscape architect at Kimley-Horn with 19 years of experience. I'll be the moderator for the discussion, and joining me today are John Reddick and Barry Wilcox. A little bit about both of them. John Reddick is a Tallahassee native who returned home to attend graduate school at FSU and has worked locally since that time. He is the director of the city's growth management department, overseeing permitting and development regulations for the city of Tallahassee. He has been with the city since 2015, working previously as a planner and as the city's land use administrator. John is certified through the American Institute of Certified Planners and has LEED Advanced Professional Accreditation for neighborhood development through the U.S. Green Building Council. He also serves on the Capital Region Board of the Urban Land Institute. Barry Wilcox is both a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners and Certified Public Manager. He has over 20 years of experience as a professional planner in both the public and private sectors. Currently, he serves as the director of Leon County's Department of Development Support and Environmental Management, where he guides a team of 70 professionals responsible for a broad variety of tasks, including building plans review and inspections, environmental management, site planning, and code enforcement. In addition, he proactively engages with the development community and citizen groups to resolve conflicts and identify opportunities for improvements in environmental protection and development review. Barry served in multiple leadership roles with APA Florida and as an adjunct professor at Florida State University, his graduate school alma mater. So let's get into the podcast. Today, we're going to discuss 3 topics, including permitting, land premiums, and design. So to start with permitting, you guys deal with this day in and day out. You're always pushed to move quickly. There's 3 kind of subtopics to this discussion, which include expediting the permits. The second would be, we're going to talk about developers and consultants creating sufficient plan sets for review. And lastly, that high level of communication you really appreciate coming from whether it's local or out of town consultants. And with that, John, I want to open the floor up to you, and then Barry, hear your thoughts after that.
Sure. Thanks, Charlie. And Barry and I have often coordinated and share, information with one another to try to improve on this first topic, because we see a lot of the same issues both internally and with the entities we work with each day. And expedite kind of takes 2 forms. One is, we do have formalized expediting processes for permits that applicants can request and pay extra for, but then there's sort of expedited processes that just looked at to make it a more expedient review, and that kind of goes into the other 2 things you were mentioning, the developers and consultants creating sufficient plan sets, and those high levels of communication. So I think any applicant of any level of permitting would prefer to have their permit expedited, but it is a matter of managing a very high volume and keeping our processes efficient and making sure we can achieve our review deadlines for all of our customers. And so that can mean saying, yes, you are expedited, but you are expedited along with a lot of other applicants, who are all trying to get this same turnaround. And I think one area where you've seen that push its way into just saying really every permit is expedited is our residential single family permitting. And I think the county, their metrics are similar in these quick review times, in that we have a guarantee program to have your single family residential permit out in 7 days, or else you get your money back for your application fee. And our review time on that, because we prioritize it so much, our average review time is under 3 days for this to get them turned around now. And I'll let Barry touch on that from his side of things, but it has gotten where expediting is such a priority because of the time sensitive nature of the industry, that it sort of pushes where everyone's in the same race to expedite, and so then everyone is, applicants sort of competing with one another. Now, we do also have, like I said, a formalized process for certain commercial scale projects that are actually under a certain size to qualify, because when you're getting too large, an expedited review of 10 days versus 20 may not be appropriate. What that may do is just cause additional rounds of reviews, if staff can't get an appropriate review done for a large scale project, and make sure that everything is being well attended to and not causing problems down the line for the permitting process. So as the scale of project goes up, there's obviously a high level of attention to these large scale projects, but it's not always in the best interest to do a review as quickly as possible if the quality can't follow with it. So I think that's why you see a difference in at least how the city breaks out their expedited permitting opportunities. And I'll let Barry comment on that, because I know he has some good thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'll start with a few figures. The county's Department of our building department, our Department of Building Review and Inspection, turns about 6,000 to 7,000 permits a year. About 70 to 80% of our permits, or 78% of our development review is single family, as you would expect. We are sort of the unincorporated areas, the bedroom community to the incorporated area in Tallahassee. And about every year it goes up, but about 75% of our permits right now are turned online instantly. And those are permits that don't require any review per the Florida Building Code. Things like re-roofs, where you're not getting any structural portion of the roof. All you're doing is taking off the old roofing material and putting down new roofing material. Don't really require plans review, because it's just a direct replace. Swap outs for windows and doors and HVAC swap outs and things like that can be handled almost instantly. So for all intents and purposes, those are expedited permits. I mean, you can't get any faster in an instant. They still require inspections, so we still have to send our inspectors out to take a look at the work. Something with like a re-roof requires actually 3 inspections, and we've even found a way to expedite that process via affidavits and that, to save time for both the contractors and for the department, so we can focus our attention on other stuff. But I think John hit on it. There's, the word expedited, it gets brought up quite a bit, and there's really only a few ways you can do that. We don't have any kind of superfluous review in our process. I think a lot of people think, we've just added stuff onto the review process for whatever reason. But in reality, what we're doing is we're reviewing the life, health, and safety aspects of any construction as guided by the Florida Building Code, which we don't have control over. Florida Building Code is governed and amended by the Florida Building Commission. And so that gets handed down to us, and we're tasked with implementing it at the local level, both my shop and John's shop. So when it comes to expediting, yeah, about the only thing you could do is jump a permit to the front of the line. So if we have 15 permits in house, somebody comes in and in some cases, we don't do this at Leon County, but in other instances, you can pay an additional fee to basically jump the line, which, it has some equity issues. You may have a mom and pop who are just, looking to do something simple at their house. And then you've got a publicly traded home builder, and their pockets are not equally deep, so the home builder may be able to jump all his 30 permits to the front of the line, putting the mom and pop the homeowner towards the back. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, every permit we do is expedited. We're moving them as fast as we can. Similar to the city, we do have a target of 8 days for new single family homes, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the majority of permits that we do. And we're right on track with that right now. We're hitting somewhere around 7 or 8 days. And what you get from the county is you get a full permit. So it's what we call a combo permit that includes not just your building, but also all the subcontractor trades, so they don't have to come in and pull separate permits from those. There are other, I've heard of jobs in other states where that are literally titled permit expediter. So a consulting firm like yours, Charlie, will have a permit expediter on staff. And what that means in that case is not someone who's in charge of writing the checks to move something to the front of the line, but rather someone who's familiar with the regulations for wherever the permit's being processed, and is responsible for putting together a good package that ensures that all the boxes are checked, all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, and that permit's going to sail through relatively quickly. So in other places, that's the permit expediter's job, is to ensure that what's submitted to the local government, the state, the Fed, whoever it might be, it contains sufficient information to get it through the process in an expedited manner. And I think that's probably a good segue to our next discussion on this topic.
Yeah, if you're saying our next, referring to the developers and consultants and how they can help things on their side. Yeah, that is the other side of making sure permit process goes smoothly. Oftentimes these get hung up because we may not be receiving a full plan set, and there are challenges on the developer side of things, between whether it's an architect or an engineer or landscape architect, contractors, and with their clients, and trying to meet their own deadlines and doing what they think is appropriate. And so there are a lot of moving pieces, obviously, but for our end of things is the more sufficient plans that can be submitted, the more efficient of a review it's going to be, and on our end. So those are the quickest turnarounds we get, is when the plan sets are well prepared. And again, and looking at the high level of communications and how that can help. That, I know we sort of reference out of town consultants, but I say that's across the board. Is a lot of our a lot of the applicants who are quickest to move through the process maintain a very high level of communication with our staff, and we make our staff extremely available. And again, I'm using the grouped we with the county as well, but that very accessible, and it helps us to have that line of communication. There's no one who benefits from a constant back and forth, multiple rounds of review or anything like that. So whatever we can do, starting early in a permitting process, with a large project to a small project, to make sure that applicants know specifically what they need to submit and how to do that, then that's going to make sure that when we have it, we can get it reviewed, turned around, and out the door as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I always like to use an analogy. It goes back to my teaching experiences. It's always easier to grade an A paper than it is to grade an F paper. Yeah, because in the F paper, you've got to go through and you've got to mark it all up, and you've got to go through, hey, this wasn't done right and that wasn't run right, to justify that grade. The A paper is always easier. And so, yeah, the quality of submittal that we receive definitely has a direct correlation to how quickly that thing moves through the process. And for many contractors, consultants, it's repetitive work. They're doing the same thing. They're they're a home builder or they're an environmental consultant, and the product that they turn into us as local governments is the same. It varies based upon location and project type, but for the most part, the requirements remain the same. And the thing that we as local governments can provide and should provide is both transparency and consistency in review, so that you know exactly what needs to be submitted in order to get a permit. And the process is highly transparent, meaning if there's any issues with it, you know what those are. We're in quick and direct communication with the applicant to ensure that we're getting everything we need to get that permit turned as quickly as possible. That being said, you know, if you just look at overall permit times, sometimes they can be misleading because someone may submit an application to us that doesn't contain half of what it should or it's required to contain in order for us to issue that permit via state statute, or Florida Building Code, I should say. And we'll send back relatively quickly, you know, a request for that additional information or for some clarification that would enable us to issue that permit. And it may take a week, 2 weeks. In some cases, we've had permits sitting out there for a month or so. And we'll make repetitive contact with that applicant to remind them that we're waiting on that material to get that permit issued. But then when you look at the overall permit time, it looks like the permit took 30 to 60 days to turn, when in reality, it was only in our inbox for 4 or 5 days, and then it was in the applicant's inbox for another 30 to 40 days or something along those lines. Those are relatively rare. We do get a lot of great applications. And we do a sufficiency review right at the front end to ensure that everything's there before we even take the permit in. But that's just more, hey, everything looks like you've turned in all the pieces. Then those pieces then have to be reviewed by people who are licensed to do so, who can look at something like a building plans and be able to say, yeah, this is a trust plan, and yes, this trust plan meets all the requirements of the Florida Building Code. And therefore we can stamp it approved, and there's no life, health, or safety issues with that.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into the second topic. I can speak to it too, being on the private side, is that the market's been so hot that so many consultants on the private side are rushing to get these permits in that oftentimes I think those T's aren't crossed or I's dotted. And so it's upon us in the private sector to make sure those plans are thorough. That said, with moving into the second topic, we all know that the residential market has been hot over recent years, and it's led to a shortage of supply. And wanted to get your take, Barry, on land being at a premium, and any thoughts you got on infill development, what you've been seeing, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and just any opinions you got as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, Tallahassee's a growing community, and we're not who we were in 1970 or 1990, or even in the early 2000s for that matter. And like many growing communities, there's that as that growth spurt starts, you've got readily available land close to town that's got no significant environmental features on it, and it's easy to develop. But as you grow outward, and as you fill in those pieces, good developable land becomes harder to come by. And some of those pieces that were overlooked for many years due to complexity start to come onto the market. And it does make review tougher for John and I, in that, you're then dealing with a site that might have, some significant wetlands on it, or a floodway, or steep slopes, or something of that sort. But it just means that we need to make the most of the good land that we do have available to us, and oftentimes that's done through infill and redevelopment. And what your community looked like 30 or 40 years ago may not be what it can look like moving forward and still be sustainable. For many years, Tallahassee, heck, in town, right, John, we got lots in town that are half acre in size or more. You got lots literally within walking distance of the Capitol that are 100-foot wide lots with a single family home on them. And that's what Tallahassee was for a long time. It was very much a bedroom community. But moving forward, if we want to, retain our rural areas and our environmentally sensitive areas on the periphery, we're going to need to look more closely at how our urban areas are developed, and look for opportunities for infill development for those smaller, undeveloped lots that might still exist, and then for redevelopment of some areas that maybe aren't making the most of the land. It's not the highest and best use of that property. If you've got a 1,500 square foot house in town on a 1 acre lot, there's opportunity there to redevelop that, and maybe to bring into the market a product that historically we've been underserved with, like townhomes, small scale multifamily in the form of triplexes and quads, and other stuff that we refer to oftentimes as the missing middle. That product that's an entry level product for younger folks, and that makes the most of the limited amount of land that we have available.
Yeah, and to tag on to that, I mean, so what that does for us as an entity is, sort of the keepers of our land development regulations, is to look and say, if we recognize this as a emerging priority of adaptive reuse and utilization, improved utilization of properties that are already developed, then does our code sort of follow those values? And do we have incentives in place, or, are we making it realistic and feasible for developers, property owners, business owners to pursue already developed properties and see the opportunity there? And do they know about these opportunities if we have them available? So that's a big thing on our end. We do have a lot of existing incentives in place that, for things like your stormwater infrastructure and your stormwater impacts, that you can get credit for, traffic impacts and things like that basically can bring down the project cost significantly, in exchange for maybe where on the other end of things you're having to do more demolition or whatever that than you would on a completely undeveloped site. So it is a major priority, and it's good in terms of the broader system. From a planning standpoint, is we already have infrastructure in place to serve these sites, and I think you also see, where in terms of prioritizing it is public investment in a lot of areas with the hope that private investment will follow. So we can take the large example of Gain Street as one where that was a major public investment, and the amount of private investment has followed has been significant, both on spreadsheets and visibly walking the streets there. And that's an example of where that accommodates a population, the student population for the most part, who I know is only a subset of Tallahassee, but it was able to relocate an existing population, within our broader downtown area, and further concentrate it. And what that does is that opens up areas for single family neighborhoods that were established before students moved into those neighborhoods, is now being opened back to where you can have families or working professionals or senior citizens, other groups be able to move back into those spaces. So it's also a matter of, if we can create housing, if we can create job opportunities and commercial space in these areas that are underutilized, then what else does it open up? How does it relieve pressure elsewhere in the city and in the community that then leaves some opportunities in those spaces too?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, John, and it kind of hits on one of our, probably one of our best projects to date as a local government, and that's Gain Street. You had a historically underutilized area of town there, wedged between two campuses, and we were able to make the most of that, make the most of the infrastructure that already existed there. When you talk to the developers who have developed on Gain Street, one of the things that they always say is, hey, the local government removed all the barriers to entry to make that happen. They did lay at our feet some pretty significant design criteria, But they took care of the, the stormwater, the water, the sewer, the transportation network. All that stuff was taken care of. So for a developer, those are liabilities. If I move on that site, am I going to be able to am I going to run into issues with how I accommodate the stormwater that's generated from my impervious surface? Will I have sufficient water pressure for fire flows for multi-story buildings? Will I have sufficient sewer, or am I going to have to extend that and improve it? So a lot of those things were taken care of, and as a result, we saw a significant return on investment for Gain Street. And you're right, we provided student housing where student housing should be, which then alleviated pressures on those surrounding neighborhoods that had been historically family-oriented neighborhoods, and housing for staff for FSU and Florida A&M, as well as other folks.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see what's emerging with new public investment like FAMU Way, and obviously Cascades Park has had a huge private investment following that. So yeah, we're continuing to see that, and it's great to see.
Well, and Barry made mention of design criteria along Gain Street. I think that's a good lead into the third topic, which is about design. A lot of places throughout the city don't have that, right? We've got the land development code that they have to follow. And so they may make sufficient plans they turn into you guys to review. They meet all the code requirements, they're communicating to you. But when you step back and you say, what's the final product you leave behind? What is the quality of that design? And how does that carry throughout what our community looks like? And I just want to hear your thoughts about that. John, I'll hand it off to you first. When you look at these plans coming through, and anything you might want to share to those of us on the private side putting these plans in, what to consider when we do design versus just maybe the code minimum.
Sure. And I think let's start with the stuff that is required in those specialized areas. I think, our along Gain Street and Madison, and like our All Saints district. And those are areas that have probably the more restrictive actual looking at design in terms of elevations and things like that, and more stringent criteria. That's very intentional to ensure that it's not just, a pretty building, so to speak. Everyone, any owner is concerned about that, but that it's sort of an acknowledgement that those details play into the broader surrounding area. And it's not just a look and feel, but I mean, there are things that we require that, like having direct pedestrian access to sidewalks, and having, units actually open to the sidewalk instead of having all internal, hallways and being very excluded and just being a box next to a sidewalk. And that plays into a lot of important factors that help, create a neighborhood versus a series of buildings in terms of the engagement of people coming and going from the street, the activity on the street. And what it does is having those components in place to make it a more active, engaging development, but you say development, but housing or business or whatever the occupancy is of it, that then helps to signal to other people wanting to invest in the area, what this area is intended to be. And I think it's less of a beware, you will have to do these things, and more of a, when people see that activity and they see this as an engaging space, people want to invest there. So these are things that we say, if we can achieve these minimum standards, it's going to make other people, it raises the value of everything to where other people see and say, oh yeah, I want to invest in that area, or I want to place my business in that area, or live in that area. And now we're seeing that big time, not even just college town, but just within our downtown core, people actually having a demand to want to live in that area because we are achieving a higher level of design. And so I think that when and maybe this is less for design professionals, because I think they all certainly achieve to want to design great things, but for the people investing in these projects is to recognize that incorporating a higher level of design than maybe you're even required to do, especially if you look at it at a basic level from construction, the types of construction can help with the longevity of that. But then also in terms of aesthetic, is that can make other people want to invest around you and raise the value of your project over the long term. And so that's something I don't think that should be lost on people who are entering into the development arena.
Yeah, design is so critical. I think it really is a key point moving forward as we rethink how we develop, and both on the public and private side, because Game Street would not have happened if not for the investment in the street itself. You know, if we had just laid down a bunch of design guidelines, a bunch of requirements on the private developers, but then left Game Street as a 4-lane, street with no medians and relatively little to no sidewalks or other amenities. There's no incentive for people to build pretty buildings on an ugly street. So that that design requirement, that onus for good design is both public and private. So as local governments, we're responsible for ensuring that what we do is attractive and well designed and functional and safe. FAMU Way is a great example of that. We took a roadway there and improved it just like we did with Gaines. A lot of what's the private sector is oftentimes is roadways, is our transportation infrastructure. But being linear in nature, they can affect such a broad area. Parks also, Cascades Park was once just fields that acted as floodplains when it got really rainy. But that's obviously been improved into a piece of infrastructure that is cleverly disguised as a great public park and a public amenity. I think, we overlook design, and we oftentimes focus so much on use. And that goes back to the birth of planning. And this Euclidean approach, which is Euclid was a court case out of I think the early 1900s, where zoning was established, and this idea that, hey, you can't put this use by that use, which was kind of ironic because at that time we were doing great design, and we were including like neighborhood scale commercial in residential neighborhoods, and no one saw an issue with that. No one was offended by the fact that on a otherwise residential block at the corner you had a neighborhood store, and that's because that store was designed to be similar to what was around it. It was compatible. It was in scale with and the design features of it, the materials used, were consistent with the neighborhood as a whole. Today, we tend to, over the course of the last 100 years or so, we tended to split things out based upon use. So, hey, that commercial can't be near that residential, and that industrial needs to be way out on the edge of town. We're finding ways, more and more so, that those things can be compatible. A mixture of uses is attractive, and it's functional, and it's sustainable. And as our new projects come in, you'll see that things that used to be a monoculture of a single use start to become mixed use, and that's most redevelopment projects. What used to just be a retail center now not only has retail, but it also has a residential component to it, has an office component to it, it has a recreational component to it. So design does matter.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Barry. And is we have, and I'll go back to some design standards that we have, required, and that wouldn't be above and beyond, but especially in our multimodal district, is things like transparency. And we get these, we'll have users or interested parties coming to look at properties or wanting to do a building design. They're saying, your code requirements don't match my use. I don't want to have 60%, transparency glass across, facade across the front. But our code now has improved to incorporate this design element to say, we're not trying to design this and have these buildings. The buildings often outlast the initial user, right? And so it says, what can we do for the construction of a building to say that if this initial user moves on, it's going to be a great fit for a laundry list of users that we want in this area. And so, that's why there are things that we set to say, this is very intentional where we want this in this area, and we want not just certain uses to be mixed, but we want buildings that will last and contribute to the fabric of these neighborhoods or business areas, whatever, for decades. So, through multiple generations of different uses.
Yeah, John, that's an excellent point. You know, we've got historic buildings in our downtown. You've got buildings in downtown Thomasville that have been over their lifespan many things. You know, they may have started out as an office building that then was, you know, converted into retail that then included a residential component. It's not about the use of the building, it's about the design of the building itself that lends itself to being reused as all the other things. What we see a lot of today is single-use buildings. You know, something that's designed specifically for one user. And you're right, that once that user leaves, and that could happen at any moment. You know, under economic, depending on the economic conditions, who's going to move into that? You know, you look at some of our discount stores, right? Whether the large scale ones or even the smaller scale ones, they're purpose built. They're very specific to that user at that time. But should that user no longer exist, what does that evolve into? It doesn't transform easily into, you know, another use, another you know, residential use or an office use. It rarely even transforms very easily into another retail use because it was built so specifically for that one end user.
Yeah, I can speak to experience. The office I used to be in at the corner of Madison and Copeland, just down from FSU's main entrance, it was originally a laundromat going way back. And then our company had a landscape architecture office in there, along with an architect and sustainable Tallahassee. And today it's a childcare facility. So it's gone through three very different uses, but used the same building throughout those years. And it seems there's lots of opportunities to preserve what exists now, in addition to what comes in as new construction. Too many times you see it go away. And like you mentioned, Thomasville has such a great fabric they've been able to preserve.
Yeah. You have to ask yourself, you know, if downtown Thomasville was a 90s era shopping mall, would we all be going up there for a Christmas festival? You know, it's like probably not. You know, it's about the design. Yeah. It's about the fact that it's pedestrian oriented and attractive and unique. So I think we can use design to waylay a lot of the fears about redevelopment and infill development, especially in some of our residential areas where people get very fearful of increasing the density in their neighborhoods. But frankly, you can retain the density, but build something that's completely out of scale and character for that neighborhood. I've seen it done. And whereas you can increase the density, say take a single family home to a couple of townhomes or even 3 or 4 townhomes, but through design, ensure that it fits with the neighborhood. So design, I think, is the key to moving forward and ensuring that we develop in a sustainable manner and that we utilize our existing infrastructure, which is in town, through infill and redevelopment, and evolve to something that's kind of a hybrid of where we went to in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and where we were in the 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Yeah, and before we sort of conclude this thought, I do want to give credit to a lot of the local doers, I'll say, when the design professionals, business owners, and people, and entrepreneurs who we've had a lot of in the last, 5 years or so, some really good projects of people, either new construction taking on and actually putting a lot of thought and effort into good design, or the adaptive reuse and things like that. And so, our local business and design community is I think really starting to take a step forward, and take a lead on that to I guess to acknowledge that as a priority in our community. So it's good to see.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great examples out there. Other communities have implemented design criteria. I'm always amazed, when you go into a small town that has robust design standards and you come across what is otherwise a major retail or a fast food establishment, something like that, that does not look like, a chain store or the standard drive-through fast food restaurant. They've worked with the community to ensure that it's compatible and it fits with the community, and at the same time, they get to be there in the community, and the community gets the benefit of having that establishment there.
Well, I want to thank you both for taking time out of your day to speak with us today. I think you gave us a lot of good insight that many people in the development community are going to be interested in. To go back over it, we covered discussions of permitting process. We talked about land premiums, development in those spaces that remain downtown and in the urban fabric. And then lastly, good design. I think there's a lot to take out of this, and, can say from my personal experience, I've greatly enjoyed working with you two, and think the city and the county are lucky to have you both at the helm doing what you're doing.
Thanks, Charlie. Appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity, Charlie. And John, it's always, John and I, as he mentioned in the beginning, we work very closely together to ensure that we're kind of we're working off the same sheet of music.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. And again, this is a podcast being put on by the Capital Region of ULI, and we look forward to having you back next time. Take care.